story goes back to the 12th century. So you have to imagine the monk that is still very important in the story of the Aube and in the story of Drappier, who's Saint Bernard. So Saint Bernard was a Cistercian monk. The Abbaye de Cîteaux was located, and it's still, even though it mostly looks like ruins now, but very close to the Côte de Nuit. And this monk left his own abbey to settle in his own abbey, and he took Pinot Noir with him to Champagne, and he built this abbey that is called Clairvaux or Clairvaux that we'll talk about later. And he is really the man that planted Pinot Noir in the Côte des Bars, and we're talking about 800 years ago. And that's thanks to him that we have Pinot Noir in Champagne, but that's also due to him that, especially in our region, because Clairvaux is located 10 kilometers from Urville, from our estate, we were Pinot Noir driven for centuries and centuries. And well, there was a lot of different varietals, but Pinot Noir was really the varietal that was dominant, because back in the days, they were making red wine. They were making red wine for the mass, and they were selling red wine all over Europe. They were really, really powerful. They're very important monks. They had hundreds of sister abbey around Europe, and Pinot Noir was the king variety back in the days. And what happened? There was many waves of different varietals and many waves of accidents. The main accident was the phylloxera, obviously, at the beginning of the 12th century. Pinot Noir is a very fragile variety. Well, everything was completely broken, and in the beginning of the 12th century, they started replanting gamay because it was easier, more rustic, and gamay was replanted and was the dominant variety up until the war. Approximately the war. And my great-grandfather, who was nicknamed Père Pinot, is really the man who was defending the legacy of the Pinot Noir in the Côte des Bars, and said that if we wanted to go up in quality, we had to take away the gamay and replant the Pinot. And he was fighting and with all the interprofession to replant the Pinot Noir. And he succeeded, because now the Pinot Noir is, the Aube region is planted 70% of Pinot Noir, because that's the history. And Drappier is also planted 70% of Pinot Noir. And really, it's interesting to see that started with my great-grandfather, Père Pinot. My grandfather and my grandmother both really, really worked around the Pinot Noir, even though they were making a blend with Pinot Noir. But my father took that heritage and turned it into 100% Pinot Noir. I know I have it as a magnum. I plan to celebrate with my friends later. That's why I took a magnum.
That's awesome. The perfect size. Perfect size for two when one person isn't drinking. That's what we say, right?
Yes, exactly.
I love the color in this, and I mean you can tell immediately that it's definitely high in Pinot because of the slightly pink color that it has. Yes. But I believe this is aged about 4 or 5 years in the cellars.
Yes.
And what I love also is it is Brut nature, so zero dosage.
Yes, so that's the story with the Brut nature. First I want to mention what you just said about the colors. Very important. We call it in Drappier slightly a copper color, copper tainted, because it has this hint of pink or warm orange. It's hard to exactly define, but you can tell, at least at Drappier, what is 100% Pinot Noir, what's 100% Chardonnay. The reason also for that is that we don't discolor our wine. So that was something that was very usual a couple of years ago. Fortunately, it's becoming more and more rare. But people used to discolor. Do you say discolor in English? I don't know, but take the color away with charcoal to make it look more light. Because back in the days, clients who expected champagne to be very, very pale. good thing that things have changed, and now you can totally have the natural color in your glass. So yeah, Pinot Noir, and now the story with the Blanc de Noir and the Brut nature. So as I was saying, my father took this heritage. He did his winemaker studies in Beaune, so he didn't study in Champagne, which is quite rare for a Champagne winemaker. Usually, Champagne winemakers study in Champagne. But he did his studies in Beaune, and he really learned to work with Pinot Noir as a red wine. And he said there is so much potential in Urville in making a Blanc de Noir. That was in the early 90s. Pinot Noir, Blanc de Noir were not fashionable at all. It's interesting to see now that you see Blanc de Noir popping everywhere. And he started working on the Blanc de Noir, and he did not think it worked with the dosage. And this is when he started making the dosage. And again, we're talking about the early 90s, when also no one had ever heard, well, there were a couple of low dosage, no dosage, but even no dosage was really, really rare. And it really was the genesis of this cuvée, is that he thought Pinot Noir in Urville doesn't work with dosage because of that ripeness that we have in Urville, and the terroir, Kimmeridgian limestone. It brings so much freshness, minerality to Pinot Noir that on 100% Pinot Noir, if you add dosage, it makes it really heavier than it should be. And this is when this is how the Brut nature really started to be released, like something really, really strange for the days. And now it's become one of our most famous cuvées. So it's an interesting story.
It's beautiful. It does have, you can distinctly tell that it is Pinot Noir because of the weight on the palate, but it does have still a beautiful acidity. And I can see what you mean about, adding too much, adding sugar to this, where you'd lose its lightness. I see what you mean.
Yes. So we want that airy feeling that's, oh, by the way, cheers.
Santé.